The night was heavy, as if the air around me was made of lead. I could feel the storm approaching, even before hearing the first thunderclaps. There was something oppressive in that silence, a sense that something was lurking, just waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The house I was in seemed to amplify that feeling. Every inch of the old walls seemed imbued with a story I would rather not know. The wooden floorboards creaked beneath my feet, as if the house itself was complaining about the weight of the years. The windows, framed by heavy, dusty curtains, offered only glimpses of the outside, where darkness had swallowed everything. Outside, the rain began to fall in thick drops, as if the sky was pouring its wrath upon the earth. The sound of water hitting the roof was constant, almost hypnotic, but at the same time, it was impossible not to feel a certain discomfort, as if the rain was trying to isolate me even further. I was alone, as always, but that night felt different. There was an unease I couldn't shake, something that made me feel as though I was being watched. The ticking of the clock on the wall was the only sound breaking the monotony, and with every passing second, the feeling of anxiety grew within me, as if I was waiting for something I didn't know, but that deep down I feared. Then the phone vibrated on the table. The sound was almost imperceptible amid the storm, but I heard it clearly, as if it were inside my head. I picked up the device with slightly trembling hands and looked at the screen. A new message from an unknown number. I opened the message, perhaps expecting a mistake or a random error. But what I saw made my heart race. The photo was of the front of my house, taken from outside with the rain falling in the background. There was no text, no explanation of who sent it or why. Just that image. But then I noticed something that made the blood run cold in my veins. The photo had been taken minutes ago, and I hadn't heard anything. No footsteps, no voices, no sound of a camera shutter. At that moment, I realized that the storm wasn't the only thing approaching. Something or someone was out there, watching. And now I knew I was alone, but no longer safe. The initial shock from the photo left me paralyzed for a few seconds, but soon adrenaline took over. I needed to do something, needed to understand what was happening. Instinctively, I dialed the police. The seconds seemed to stretch as the phone rang, but instead of hearing a dispatcher's voice, all I got was unsettling silence, followed by static noise that seemed to increase in intensity. I hung up and tried again. This time, the call didn't even connect. I looked at the phone screen, perplexed, watching the signal bars fluctuate between weak and non-existent. The storm outside didn't seem severe enough to cause a network outage, but still, I was isolated. Then I heard it, a subtle sound, almost imperceptible, coming from the hallway. A door creaking, as if it were being slowly opened. At first, I thought it was the wind, but something made me hesitate. The sound was methodical, deliberate, as if someone were carefully opening that door to avoid being noticed. My heart raced, and without thinking, I grabbed a heavy object, the first thing I could find to defend myself. I walked slowly to the hallway, each step echoing through the house, the silence broken only by the sound of the rain outside. But what I found was only a door ajar, swaying slightly. I tried to convince myself it was just a draft, but then I heard something that made me doubt my own sanity. Footsteps. Soft footsteps, almost as if someone were walking in socks on the wooden floor, coming from the opposite direction. I turned abruptly, expecting to see someone there, but the hallway was empty. The only thing that accompanied me was my own reflection in the mirror at the end of the hallway, a reflection that seemed to stare back at me with a look of desperation I didn't want to admit feeling. And then, as if to confirm my worst fears, the phone vibrated again in my hand. Another message. I opened it with trembling fingers. The new photo showed the interior of the house, this time capturing the hallway where I was standing. Once again, no text, no explanation, just the image revealing something I hadn't noticed before. A shadow in the corner of the photo, almost out of frame. An indistinct figure, but definitely human. The tension in my chest became unbearable. Before I could process what it meant, another vibration, and then another. Messages began arriving one after the other, each with a new photo, each one closer, each more threatening. The last one showed the door to my bedroom, the doorknob slowly turning. Then I heard the whisper, low and almost inaudible, but enough to chill me to the bone. I couldn't distinguish the words, but the tone was clear, threatening, mocking. Someone or something was inside my house, playing with me, and I was completely alone. The air inside the house seemed to grow heavier with each passing minute. I tried to stay calm, but the feeling of being watched was starting to drive me insane. The sound of footsteps, which had been a distant echo before, was now getting clearer, closer. Every creak in the floorboards, every groan of the planks under the weight of something or someone invisible made my heart leap in my chest. I was sure I was no longer alone, but whatever was pursuing me remained hidden in the shadows. It was the shadows that disturbed me the most. The way they danced on the walls, as if they had a life of their own. The dim light from the lamps seemed
once
to
just
flicker,
a common path in the
creating
house,
shapes that
now
twisted
seemed to
and
stretch
stretched,
indefinitely,
making it impossible
like a tunnel
to
leading me
distinguish
deeper
what
into
was
a nightmare
real
from
what
which
was
I
a
couldn't
product
wake.
of my
I
growing
tried to
fear.
think rationally
But every
to
time
get
I
out
turned
before
around
it was too
quickly,
late.
hoping to
But
catch
when I
something
reached
in
the
the
front
act,
door, the
everything would go
doorknob
back to
wouldn't
normal.
budge. I
started
twisted
to
with
question
all the
my
strength I
sanity.
had, but it didn't move an inch. It was locked, but I didn't remember locking it. I ran to the back door, my heart pounding so fast it felt like it might explode. The hallway seemed to close in around me, the walls drawing nearer as if the house itself was trying to swallow me. When I finally reached the back door, I found the same resistance. Locked, inexplicably, as if someone was locking me in from the inside. I pulled the curtains aside to look through the window, but the storm outside had intensified, and all I saw was a blur of darkness and rain. I shouted, in a mix of frustration and despair, but the sound was swallowed by the emptiness of the house. I was trapped, and the feeling of being watched intensified with every passing second. I could feel the gaze of something or someone piercing through me as if it were enjoying my terror. The walls seemed to close in even more, and the footsteps, now definitely behind me, made me spin around abruptly. But again, nothing, just emptiness. An emptiness that seemed to be mocking me as I ran from one exit to another, each one blocked in an inexplicable way. Breathing was becoming difficult, as if the very air was being drained from the place. I knew I needed to get out, but every path I tried was a trap. It was becoming clear. The house, or whatever was inside it, wasn't going to let me leave. My breathing was erratic, and each heartbeat seemed to echo through the house's corridors, amplifying my fear. I was on the verge of collapse, not knowing what to do or where to go. It was then, in the midst of my desperation, that I noticed a small door ajar in one of the rooms. A door I didn't remember seeing before. Something was pulling me in, as if that door hid the key to understanding the nightmare I was living. I entered the room, which seemed to be some sort of abandoned office. The air was dense, filled with dust and forgotten memories. In the dim light, something about the old desk caught my attention. A stack of old, yellowed papers, covered by a layer of dust. My gaze was drawn to a photograph partially hidden among the papers, as if someone had tried to conceal it but not quite succeeded. I took the photo with trembling hands and, as I blew off the dust, felt a shiver run down my spine. The image was black and white, faded by time. It showed a group of people in front of a house, this house. I immediately recognized the place, though the photo was clearly from another era. But what froze me was one particular figure, in the corner of the photo, almost at the edge, as if trying to hide from the focus. A man with hollow eyes and a smile that didn't seem human. Something about that smile made me feel a cold that didn't come from the environment but from within me. I turned the photo over, and on the back, handwritten, was a name I knew well, my surname, followed by the word traitor, and a date that went back decades before I was born. The connection was clear, and the terror hit me like a wave. I wasn't being pursued by a living person, but by something much older, much more malicious. That figure in the photo wasn't there by accident. It was connected to me in a way I couldn't fully understand yet, but I was beginning to perceive. Before I could process what it meant, I felt a presence in the room. The air around me seemed to compress, as if all the shadows were converging in one point. I looked around but saw nothing, only the ever-denser darkness. But I knew it was there. Something or someone was with me in that room. Then the silence was broken by a voice. A low, cold, inhuman whisper that seemed to come from all directions at once. "You carry the burden of your ancestors," the voice said, and with each word, the room's temperature seemed to drop further. "What has been done cannot be undone, but it can be paid for." Suddenly, the figure from the photo materialized before me, an indistinct form shrouded in shadows, but with that smile that seemed to cut through the darkness like a blade. There were no eyes, only voids that stared back at me, piercing through me. I couldn't move. Terror held me in place, and then the entity spoke again, but this time I knew it wasn't just for me, but for something much deeper. "You knew. Deep down, you always knew." Understanding hit me like a physical blow. This being, this entity, was tied to a crime that had been buried in my family's past. Something no one had ever spoken of, but that still breathed in the darkness of that house. And now I was being forced to face the price of that secret. The entity moved closer, and I knew there was nowhere to run. The purpose was clear. I was the last link in a chain of guilt and curse. And now, what had been started so long ago was coming to an end, with me. The room seemed to shrink around me, the walls closing in as if they wanted to crush me. The entity was there, hovering before me, a presence made of shadows and hatred, with that impossible smile, no eyes, only emptiness. I could feel the weight of the past it carried, a burden that now fell on me. There was no escape. Every fiber of my being wanted to run, but I knew it would be futile. This thing was after more than just my life. It was after redemption, or perhaps revenge, and I was the final target. The voice, cold and hissing, echoed again through the room. "What has been started must be finished." The words came not only from outside but from within, resonating in my mind, penetrating my bones. It was as if the very air around me was imbued with malice, and I was suffocating in it. I needed to act, do something, but fear kept me paralyzed, as if my legs were made of lead. But then, something within me stirred. A memory, a flash of something I hadn't known was there. Maybe it was the weight of all the guilt my family had carried, or perhaps it was the survival instinct, the last vestige of humanity I had left. Facing this entity was not just a matter of life or death. It was about finding a way out of this curse, a chance to break the cycle. "If it's redemption you seek," I whispered, my voice trembling and weak, "then take it from me." I didn't know where those words came from, but they came out with a force I hadn't imagined I had. The entity stopped. The void where its eyes should have been seemed to fixate on me, assessing my words, my soul. "I am the last," I continued. "Finish it with me. End this curse." For a moment that seemed to stretch endlessly, there was only silence. And then, slowly, the entity began to move toward me. Each step it took felt like a direct blow to my chest, the pressure in the air increasing, the cold penetrating deeper. I knew that if I didn't act now, it would be the end. Not just of me, but of any chance for redemption. Summoning every ounce of courage I had, I took a step forward, forcing myself to face that void staring back at me. "I accept the burden," I said, my voice firmer this time. "Whatever has been done, whatever you have suffered, let it end here." The entity stopped, And then, with a swift and unexpected motion, it fused with me. Darkness flooded my vision, and suddenly, I was no longer in the room. I was in another place, another time. I saw flashes of a past that wasn't mine, but that I somehow knew. Betrayal, violence, blood. And at the center of it all, a familiar face, the same one staring at me from the old photo, now twisted in agony and fury. The pain I felt was indescribable, as if all the wounds of the past were opening up inside me. But with the pain came revelation. The truth that had been buried finally revealed itself. My family had committed a horrendous crime, something that had condemned the soul to endless torment. And now I was the last link, the last to pay for it. As the darkness began to dissipate, I felt a strange calm, an acceptance of what had occurred. The entity was fading, its purpose fulfilled. But there was something more, something I hadn't anticipated. Suddenly, the ground started to shake. The walls of the house stretched and distorted, as if they were made of living flesh. And that's when I realized, by absorbing the entity, I hadn't broken the curse. I had inherited it. The cycle hadn't ended. It had merely passed to me. The house began to collapse around me, piece by piece, but I no longer felt fear. I knew what was happening. I knew that now, I was part of this dark story, an unwilling guardian of the horrible secrets buried here. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was my own reflection in the hallway mirror. My face, but with that impossible smile. The smile of the entity I had tried to defeat, but that was now part of me. And then absolute silence. The void enveloped me. I don't know if I'm still alive or if I've become something else. I only know that the curse wasn't broken. It lives in me, and the cycle will continue until someone else dares to face it. But until then, I am trapped in this place, with no time, no end, waiting for the next victim who dares to enter this house.